Camera's live.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Regional Services Committee meeting for October 28th. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. And with that, we will move to approval of the agenda. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes. The regular Regional Services Committee minutes of July 22nd, 2020. Been moved. Second. Any discussion? Director Stone? Oh, you're just, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes, Ms. Legault?
There is not.
Thank you. We'll move now to public input period. Do we have anything for public input?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no submissions for this meeting.
Thank you. We'll move on now to delegations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item D1 is Genevieve Singleton and Sheree Ayers Knock and Back Knotweed Committee for information.
I've noticed Sherry there. Welcome, Sherry.
Hi, thank you.
Genevieve, so you'll be presenting this?
Yeah, I'll be presenting. I have with me the other people. I'll introduce them.
Great. So go ahead.
Okay, so shall I try and share my screen? I did
Yes.
send a copy. Okay. So, okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yep. That works.
See if I can switch to there we go. Okay, thank you all for coming or having us, I guess you're all here. I wanted to take your time this morning to explain a project that we've been working on and talk to you a little bit about it. I have with me the other people that have been working on the project, but first I just want to acknowledge that we're here on Cowichan Tribe's traditional territory and to thank you for having us. I'd like to introduce the project I will introduce the project that we've been working on in a minute, but introduce the four biologists that are working together as a team. So we've got Dave Lindsay. He's here with me. I don't know if you can pop your head in there, Dave. There's Dave. Dave's a retired professional biologist. Been working for forestry for many, many years, and he's been involved in the project. Then we have Genevieve Singleton. She's here.
Genevieve.
Nature interpreter and biologist, and she's been working for many, many years on Bright Angel Park in particular, doing lots of tours and is really familiar with the park and the area and the local area. And then we have Dave Polster, who's a restoration ecologist. There he is.
Welcome, Dave.
So we're all crowding around one computer. So we've been working on this project, as I said, for about 5 years on an invasive plant called knotweed in Bright Angel Park. And as I'm sure you know, that invasive species are plants and animals that are not native to BC. They're outside of their natural distribution area. They can spread very rapidly, and they outcompete and dominate other natural and managed areas, and they really alter biological communities. You're probably all very familiar with Scotch broom, and then getting more familiar with the giant hogweed. They're examples in our neighborhoods, and now we also have knotweed. And knotweed is very highly invasive, and in some countries like the UK, this plant is causing pretty big havoc. And as you can see in the picture, that's knotweed growing through the pavement in the UK, and lots of people are faced with not being able to get mortgages on their houses and all kinds of other things because this plant is, once it gets a hold of a place or an area, it's really hard to get rid of. So we've been working on a project with Cowichan Tribe's involvement, at least understanding what we're up to, and on the Cokeside River in Bright Angel Park. And the Cowichan is traditionally a really important area and still currently a very important area to Cowichan tribes. I'm sure that some of you know the history of Cowichan's occupation of the territory. And on the Cowichan, right in Cowichan Station, actually was a traditional village and a weir on the river. So it's been a very long time important area. And Bright Angel Park is kind of a classic lower river spot that was protected many years ago for its naturalness and for plants and animals. So knotweed taking hold in Bright Angel Park is kind of a big deal. And because it's in the riparian area, there's no chemical removal. You can't use any kind of chemicals to remove it. So we've taken on this project over the past 5 years to look at removing knotweed in 5 sites in Bright Angel Park. We've had some pretty good success of actually reducing the volume of knotweed in the park on these trial sites every year. And most sites are not showing any regrowth in their last year. So I don't know, our little picture of us is over top of the original site here, but underneath, or I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but underneath in the picture is a huge plant of knotweed right on the gravel bar in Bright Angel. And after 5 years, it looks like this lower picture, which is a willow bush now. There was a willow inside that big knotweed infestation, and once we were able to kind of control the knotweed over 5 years, we now have the willow and no knotweed. Other non-treatment sites that we haven't been doing anything with are growing at a rapid rate and invading more and more of the river's riparian area. It's getting to be a pretty big deal in Bright Angel. And so there's a real, for us anyway, there's a real high priority to focus on removing knotweed before it gets any worse. And what we've been doing has been very effective. So we've just been manually removing it and disposing of it properly through cutting and pulling of the shoots. So, and we volunteer our time. So this is a picture of the crew of us, and we had originally involved the naturalists. We had some volunteers at the beginning of our project. I think the second year, we had a bunch of volunteers come out and help us remove knotweed. And so we bag it in a special way, and it gets taken away and disposed of properly by the CBRD. So what we need to do is basically map where and how much knotweed is now in Bright Angel Park. We need to continue the repeat cutting of knotweed on 5 pilot sites. And we're thinking that over this next year that the estimated cost would be about $5,000. And we could build some capacity and build some relationships with that money to use the First Nations contractors. There are people that are very familiar with invasives that have small businesses that are Cowichan Tribes members. We could use the project to bring more awareness of the Cowichan watershed and ignite the Cowichan community. There's a big, another big project going on around the water sustainability planning, and so there's some focus right now on the Cowichan, so that it's good timing. We can generate some information to better understand the issues faced in the park and in the river and in the valley. This is a plant that's also on the Cowichan River and in other areas. And we can increase the park health and protect the important habitat. So the bottom line is really that the Cowichan is teetering on a dangerous precipice. Knotweed is getting a really good foothold. Every year, the untreated patches are getting bigger and bigger. They're, well over my head, huge, huge patches of it. The native vegetation is being choked out, and the natural riparian areas are being lost. So in sites on below that gravel bar site, there's some pretty big areas right against the river where knotweed is just taking over. And as you can see, if you do something, the native vegetation can come back. So we need to do that before it's too late. We've proven through our scientific method of repeat cutting that it can be managed. As I said earlier, I think that year one could be a mapping and continued management of the pilot sites, so we have an understanding of what we're dealing with. And really good decisions now will lead to a better ecological and economic future. I'd hate to think of this plant getting a hold of our valley and getting into our urban areas and going through the pavement and everything else. And we need to work together. So with that, I'm going to just say thank you at Skepka and ask if you have any questions. So this picture on the right is just downstream, and that's Dave Lindsay standing beside a knotweed bush, so you can get some sense of it.
Yes. Wow. Thanks so much. Could I remind people to turn off their microphones, please, if they're not speaking? And if you could take down your presentation, Sherry, then I can see the rest of my colleagues. Thanks.
I'll try and figure out how to do that.
And see if there's any questions for you.
Where is the...
There should be a red bar at the top of your screen.
A red bar. Oh, right here. There we go. Stop sharing.
Are there any questions for Sherry? Oh, yes, there's quite a few hands up. I'll start with Director Kuhn, Director Wilson, and Director McGonigal. Director Kuhn, go ahead, please.
Yes, we know that chemicals shouldn't be used on plants. I just wonder, I had a bamboo plant in my yard. My kids gave it to me, and we had no idea what bamboo can do, and it grew all over, and there are spikes coming up all over the lawn. I tried all kinds of concoctions that people suggested to avoid using chemicals. In the end, what I did is, and that is the only thing that helped, wherever there was a shoot coming up, I would take an eyedropper of Roundup, and I put it right on the cut surface, and it solved the whole problem. And I wonder if that couldn't be done with those plants, because that doesn't go into the environment. It goes right into the roots, and that's it. There's no contamination because you don't spray it. But if you put it on the cut, it works like fantastic. It killed the whole bamboo plant.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Sherry.
So there's no approved herbicide to be used in the riparian area. So you can't legally do that. There's nothing that we can put on the plant that's a chemical at this point in the riparian area. So that's why we're trying this as a manual removal to see if it's effective.
Follow up, Director Kuhn. Go ahead, please.
Yes, but this whole premise that chemicals shouldn't be used, it all centers around it being sprayed. If you put it right on the cut, there's no exposure to nature. It goes right into the root. And I looked into that, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the only way to deal with these plants. And they do die. That's it.
Yeah, well, it's still against the regulations. So whether it's effective right now in a practical way or not, it's against the regulations. And we were, we were trying to look at this in a holistic way to see if there was a way to do it without that. And we've proven over the last 5 years that we can deal with this without using a chemical. And, we can't use chemicals anyway, so it's not possible.
And it's great that you've proven this, because we've been told that, the only way is with injecting herbicides. So this is good that you've actually started this. So I move to Director Wilson. I recognize Director Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, great presentation there. And being a non-gardener, I've got all sorts of weeds in my place. Is it because these roots go down so deep that's the difficulty in getting rid of them, or is there some other reason why they're so difficult to control?
Yeah, it's has a very large root wad, like a big, large root area. It's very tenacious plant, and it can spread with just a tiny little piece of it that breaks off. So we've been looking at that as well and making sure that we take out everything that we take
Okay,
that off and pull out.
yeah.
And
Follow
what we're
up, please, Madam
doing,
Chair, in a minute.
what we're doing is depleting the root mass of its energy. So every time we pull the roots and pull the shoots up, we cause that plant to lose energy to reproduce more green foliage. So it's a death by 1,000 cuts or 1,000 pulls.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things that one of my gardener friends showed me was using a mixture of vinegar and that kind of natural type of weed killer that on your driveways and things like that. Is that not a solution as opposed to a chemical type of use?
Yeah, I'll let Dave Lindsay answer that because he has had experience with that.
When I worked with Timber West, we've had some trials up at Cowichan. We tried a dozen or so different things, vinegar being one of them, a couple of other natural sources, and different chemicals and applications. The stem injection that Klaus was talking about, some of them were quite effective, but all the natural ones were essentially non-effective.
Thank you, Dave. I go to Director McGonigal, Toporowski, and Nicholson.
Thank you,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. Appreciate your presentation today. I think what we've seen in the Cowichan Valley is the expansion of the knotweed into various areas besides the Cowichan. And in one of your pictures in the slide, it showed garbage bags of the knotweed that you've collected. I'm wondering, first of all, where it is disposed of, its final destination, and how that is being disposed of, first of all.
Okay, I'll let Genevieve talk to that one.
Hi there. Graham Giddens set up a plan with us that we leave it in Bright Angel Park in a particular place. We let him know that we've deposited a load, staff pick it up, and they take it to the appropriate facilities. We double bag it, we gooseneck, twist the top, and ziplock it. And these are all following proper protocol that Graham has set us up with.
And to follow up, if I may, Madam Chair, what we're seeing anecdotal is certain members of the public removing knotweed and taking it to composting facilities, for instance, and then spreading it throughout other areas, just like other invasive species. One of the things that we have noted through broom busters, etc., was to cut broom in bloom. Is there a certain time in the season when knotweed should be focused on that is more accommodating to removal? Thank you, Madam.
Yeah, I mean, our project usually starts towards the middle of May, beginning of May to the end of to the end of October when the water really comes up, because then we're not able to get at it. But really the focus is the growing period of the plant. So when the plant is photosynthesizing and putting energy into the root, we're trying to make that not happen. So we're removing all of the green above and definitely disposing of it properly so that it's not being spread further. That said, there is a natural distribution happening with beavers in the Cook Island and other areas where beavers are chewing it and taking it out into the water, and it's floating off downstream and recolonizing areas. So it's a very invasive plant, and it doesn't just take humans to move it around.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sherry and others for the update on the work that you've been doing. And the question that I had was, you mentioned other non-treatment sites are growing at a rapid rate. Are these areas places that you hadn't gotten to, or they're not easy to get to, or not enough volunteers?
Yeah, really, this was a trial to start out with. This was a trial project to see if we could use a scientific method to remove it and document that over a number of years to see if it would work. So we didn't want to tackle the whole watershed. So we just picked some pilot sites to start. And we also, even just with the 5 sites that we had, we needed volunteers to help us in the initial periods because the sites were fairly large. But it is all volunteer effort and time. So Genevieve also has another quick.
Started the project up. We started with the intent of engaging the Cowichan station community and posted and shared information on that, hoping for a possibility, a family approach, that a family would take on one patch and work on it. We were not successful in engaging very many people that way. And as we got more involved, we realized we had our hands full and we're all extremely busy people. So the way we took it on was what we could manage in our non-existent free time.
Follow-up question?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, in your post and if you continue with this project, maybe including in your post what to wear, like you can just wear running shoes, or would I need to have wearing shorts and swim shoes or something to get into the water? Just a little background on what the volunteer thing would mean to my family going down and helping you. Thank you.
Okay, could I turn to Director Nicholson? And I think we had another hand up, Director Marsh. Director Nicholson and Director Marsh to close. Go ahead.
Thank you. I find this just amazing that we have the expertise. It's a really good example of expertise of the community and the power of volunteers. And I also think we should thank the park staff for being cooperative on making this happen. But I think that what it really points out is that we are looking at an increasing problem with invasive species. And we've got a natural park asset that we've got to look after. And it is, I would say the level of commitment that's required, at the level of hands on deck to manage the species just within Bright Angel Park, and from the experience that Sherry and Dave and Genevieve and the other Dave experienced, we really need to start thinking about resourcing our parks to manage invasive species properly, to protect our natural assets. And I think there's a real opportunity. If we support this kind of thing through our just general maintenance programs, it provides an opportunity to leverage resources to deal with the areas outside of the park. And that's going to be so critical because, as Sherry noted, it's very invasive. So a little clump upstream is just going to, fragments are going to come off and float down and reinfect Bright Angel. So, the Coxsilo watershed is in enough trouble as it is without us looking at having to deal with knotweed as well. So I really think park staff should be taking invasive plant management really seriously and making sure we have funding to cover the costs of that as we move forward.
Thank you. A final speaker, Director Marsh. Go ahead, please. You turned your microphone back off.
Am I on still?
You're good now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the Daves and to Sherry and to Genevieve for, well, I was going to say years, but I probably would say decades of volunteer work around helping to protect our precious ecosystems. I like Director Nicholson's idea. I suspect if a report was to come back from staff, the cost would be a lot. And I'm not sure that this board, who's focusing on a very small increase, would be interested in covering that. So in case that did happen, I had a thought, and I wonder if there is a volunteer somewhere or a grant somehow that could come out when you guys are doing this and video it, and you could explain what you're doing, and it could be something we could post on our website, and people could do it themselves. I looked at a house in Glenora that a friend had owned, and I wanted it really bad. And 3/4 of the way around, it was full of knotweed, and it was on a creek. And I just thought, I can't take this on alone. But I just think raising awareness. I just watched the Netflix documentary, A Societal Dilemma, and it's a really good watch, actually, about algorithms and how we're being manipulated. But the point of it is the high percentage of people spend a lot of time on their devices. So I think that's where we're going to reach them, not in the newspapers so much, and not on putting up a poster, although those are great. Because I suspect the problem is way worse than we even imagine, because we're not going onto private property. So thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess we shouldn't be making a motion during a thing, but I'll speak to the chair later about a motion. Thank you.
Okay. And I'd also like to suggest that there's directors, grants, and aids and different ways of doing that as well. So seeing no other hands up, I would really like to thank, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we just, if it's okay to respond to that, it would be great. Is that okay if we can?
Go ahead.
Have the last couple minutes. Okay, Genevieve has something she wants to say.
I just want to speak to Kate's comments, and those are good ideas. I do want to point out that this is based on a 2-week repeat thing. So every 2 weeks, May to September, May to October, and we did not get follow through from people we asked to do that. So it has to be done properly. Obviously, we are volunteers. It can be done with volunteers, but it is a lot of work, and you really need to have somebody overseeing it, and it has to be followed through each site every 2 weeks, which is what brings us here for the funding. Also, just a reminder, of course, as Lori mentioned, this is a problem on the whole watershed, and we are only talking about trying to do our best in one area that CBRD has control over. There will still be knotweed growing further up, and it keeps coming down, and it will keep on growing. So this is an approach where we would be asking to set a good community example and get in buy-in from other government and private owners by doing the best that we can on what we as a community have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. And I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and we do our little thank you in our silent claps. Thank you, Sherry, so much. Take care.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
There. Bye.
We're moving on now. Ms. Legault, we have another delegation. I see Judy popped up partway there. Hi, Judy. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item D2 is Judy Stafford and Sandy Munns of the Cowichan Green community regarding their garden education center and proposed kitchen project.
Good morning, everybody.
Good
nice
morning.
to see you all. I haven't seen some of you for a very long time. And I don't see Sandy. I think he's on the next page. So thank you for allowing us to come here present today. We just wanted to give you an overview of what's been happening on the site on Beverly Street that used to be called the Incubator Seed Farm. Now it's the Garden Education Center, and Sandy, oh, there he is managing that project. We have been working more recently on trying to set up a new commercial processing kitchen. Some of you may know that we were trying to set that up at Hope Farm. That didn't really pan out. So now we're looking at hopefully putting a kitchen into a site that's at where we have the farm right now. So I'm going to let Sandy jump in and give you the presentation, which will give an overview of what's been happening on that property. And then I'll come back in at the end and just give you a little bit more information about what's happening with funding. Take it away, Sandy.
Thanks, Judy. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. I apologize. My video is dark. As it gets lighter behind me, it seems that the video doesn't like it. I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint with you guys. And can everyone see that okay?
I just want to direct the Stone, your microphone's on.
My microphone, can everyone hear okay?
Yes, you're fine, thank you. I was just reminding some other people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Sandy Munns. I've been with Cowichan Green Community for just a short period of time. My background is in environmental science, and I've worked for municipal park systems down in the Victoria area for the last 8 years. I've come up here because this really aligns with a lot of the things that I am looking for in my community. So I'll give a history of the site just for all of you so everybody is familiar.
I'm not sure, but
which year works. And
excuse me, you're cutting out. I don't know if you want to check your computer, your volume, or it's just that it's sporadic when you're speaking. If there's any chance you can fix that.
Madam Chair, ask everybody to turn off their video. It'll probably help his bandwidth too.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody else has been glitchy for me this morning. Sorry. Anyways, carrying forward, we're just going to look at the history of the site and what we have in store and what we're hoping to accomplish. This was farmland that has a long history of flooding. It's right in the floodplain of Somenos Marsh. In 2009, there was this epic flood that flooded quite the entire neighborhood under a foot or two of water. The resulting plan was to build this dike behind the that actually divided the farmland in half. This is a walkway for the public now, goes from the dog park at the end of Beverly at Lakes and carries on to Somenos Marsh right along the highway. So we ended up with this little triangle that's about 3.5 acres. It was a brownfield site. As you can see in the top right picture, it was basically fill and dirt that was just left as is, and we have been farming on it since. CGC took occupation in 2015, and we've been running programs there based around job creation, community building, and food security. All of our programs are run with grants and government funding. So 2015, we moved in, we set up our fence. We have an 8-foot tall cedar post fence around the site, keeps the deer out, but not geese. We started our seed production that year, but in 2016, we adopted more of an incubator seed farm model, which allows more of a community approach to trading seeds as part of the initiative to involve the community. 2017, we got our office, which was a used portable. It was a music room. It even came with the guitar hangers on all the walls still. 2018, we had a great initiative with some money from North Cowichan. They granted us, I believe, $15,000 to start an equipment lending library. We have equipment like the small machine you see in the top right that's available to smaller farmers who don't maybe have the means for large equipment or maybe don't have the need for equipment all the time. They can rent it as needed. Last year, we officially named the Ross Riston Inclusion Garden and built a small greenhouse to help support that. This allows for a lot of people with disabilities to come in and have access to gardening. You'll see shortly it's quite successful. This year, we ran 2 programs, the Inclusive Farming Program that you just saw, and my program, which is the Job Creation Partnership with Work BC. We also had, because CGC gets a lot of summer students, we actually had a lot of great opportunities for summer students over the summer, and you can see a couple of them enjoying the sunflowers this year. Our Inclusive Farming Program is funded with Island Health Community Wellness grants, as well as grants from Victoria Foundation. Right now, the funding allows one person to work part-time until June of next year. This has the goal of making gardening accessible to everyone. We get a lot of people that live in apartment buildings that like to garden. maybe have downsized and don't have a garden anymore, to people that have disabilities who need that accessibility to come in and enjoy nature. It's been a smashing success. You can see one of our little work parties in the bottom. We have volunteers come by every Tuesday and process seed. We also host summer camps each week through the summer, and that's moved into school groups now. We currently have 2 days a week with summer groups, and we have a long waiting list for people trying to get in some time to get their school groups down there. We have volunteers, probably a half dozen volunteers stop in a couple times a week and take care of their little patch of garden. And as you can see, we just started a couple seniors groups to kind of get more of a community feel to our volunteering efforts here. My program is the Job Creation Partnership. It's under Work PC and provides a job for myself and 3 participants. The participants are people that need a little help building job skills and are currently on EI or currently coming to the end of EI, and this allows them to build job skills without the pressure of finding a job. We started a nursery for medicinal and native plants, with a small part of that being vegetable starts in the funding. We built a 100-foot greenhouse with help from BC Green Roofs, and built a small shed for our tool library because of all the extra equipment we needed. We needed more than one shed. And because all these groups were showing up, we realized we didn't really have much cover from the sun, no community space. So we used some of the reclaimed lumber from our fence. Those cedar posts came in handy when we built a pergola there, and we have a beautiful picnic table that's wheelchair accessible. And it seems to always be full, so it's a great community space. We rebranded the site as the Garden Education Center. This is kind of an umbrella that includes the Inclusion Garden, the Tool Rental Library, our seed farm, as well as any other programs that run through there. We've had an amazing reception from our neighbors. All the other side of Beverly Street is lined with houses. And for the last few years, they've just seen a farm basically out there with, you know, a lot of weeds and grass that goes along with that. And this year they've seen a greenhouse pop out, and all these plants are everywhere and buildings popping up, and it's just an amazing makeover. So we have people that just drive by on their daily commute as well. We get a lot of people say, I finally have been able to stop in. I just never have time. I stopped in, and I love what you've done with the place. We've been selling some of our produce from the Inclusion Garden through the co-op. And it's actually, with the COVID this year, we've had a really busy year. That's coming up as well. And we've had a lot of workshops and group events ongoing. Just an amazing success this year. But as I mentioned, COVID-19 happened. I started at the beginning of April when we were in full lockdown. Most of these projects were put to a halt at that point. Things like CD Saturday, CD Sunday have still not happened. It's a little too uncertain. We were supposed to have a grand opening May 1st. That also, we just did a soft opening kind of as we needed to. Our volunteerism stopped up until, I believe, beginning of June. We opened our gates again. Part of that was having a hand washing station and other safety measures in place for the public. It really kind of added a lot of uncertainty to the future here. Nobody really knew what was going to happen. Is everything going to get locked down? Will we be allowed to come to work? What are the restrictions with farming? We've had to adopt a lot of these virtual technologies like we're using today. And then we also changed supervisors in the midst of all that. There was a lady started a couple months prior to me and left. I think the uncertainty may have had something to do with that. And this year, everybody is focusing on food. So this year, that small portion of our project was supposed to be veggie starts, ended up being probably half of our business. Everybody decided to get gardening this year. We've had so much interest in it, and the education portion of our garden center has also really helped. We have a lot of people asking questions and coming in with inquiries daily. So this all became really evident that disruptions in food chain, our supply chains, can really cause some food shortages on the island. And I think a lot of people are really aware of this now. Gardening's at an all-time high, but this made it impossible to find supplies locally. soil and amendments. We would be on a wait list to get soil this spring at Buckerfields and a couple other places. It was also, there was a lot of stores were closed, so you couldn't go and buy anything. And seeds were a really high commodity item. Even West Coast Seeds was just releasing seeds in plain paper packaging this year. We were selling a lot of seeds as well from our seed hub, and it'll be interesting to see the difference in sales from 2020 compared to the previous year. We're also getting a lot of people that are getting into fall gardening. You know, with the resurgence in COVID, people are thinking, yeah, I got to keep going with this. And we're getting a lot of veggie starts going out. We currently have a gap. We sold out of our veggie starts. Everything's still seedlings coming up. So yeah, it's been busy. So currently we are.
Excuse me, Sandy. I just want to remind you of your time. So
yes.
Do you need that much more time? How much more time?
I'm almost done, and then I'm going to hand it back to Judy.
Okay, great.
I just want to set up what we have in the works right now. We're currently applying, as Judy said, for a commercial kitchen to get put in at the site, which includes expanding the existing building. And we have a lot of interest in people wanting to develop outdoor classrooms. We have local permaculture college wants outdoor spaces for group workshops, et cetera, as well. And there's talk of a constructed wetland. North Cowichan identified the corner of our property as the ideal site for a bit of a reclamation site. So looking forward, we hope to continue to build our community with our neighbors and other people and groups in the community. We hope that we really be at the head of the innovation for farming education in the area. We've had so much great reception from the local schools. And we want to integrate more food production into our fields as well. A food production greenhouse tied in conjunction with the commercial kitchen would really help out all the stuff that CGC is doing at the moment. And so we're looking to expand our lease with North Cowichan and make sure that all our permits are in place. And we hope to move into a 10-year permit there instead of the 1 year, year by year. And so I'll leave that with Judy. Sorry if I took too much time on you, Judy.
Thank you. Judy, go ahead.
I'll unshare my thing now.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. I know that 10 minutes goes so fast. Thank you for that, Sandy. That was really a good update. And I just wanted to tell you where we're at with funding for the new kitchen and greenhouse. So we have applied to the local food infrastructure fund through the federal government for $220,000. The whole project is going to be about $300,000. And we're on our 4th round of negotiations with them. It's been extraordinarily painful. But we have someone in Ottawa going to bat for us. We've applied to the Moss Park Foundation for $40,000, and they just had their board meeting a couple of days ago, so we're hopeful. I've applied to Ice-T, so that application is pending for $30,000. I'm sending in an application this week, Investment Agriculture, with their current grant that's open right now. We have received money from Vancouver Foundation. And then I don't know if Barry's on the call. I don't think that he is. The original intention for this presentation was because Barry and I had been discussing receiving $10,000 through his initiatives that he has. Local food processing is near and dear to everyone's hearts here. There's been a lot of research studies. We just finished a demand study that says that the need for additional kitchen processing is in high demand right now in Cowichan. Our kitchen here is completely booked, and because of COVID, everything has changed. And so we were originally coming to support that. So I just talked to Barry a couple of days ago that apparently that $10,000 is not available anymore. So that's kind of disappointing, I have to say, since I've been hoping to get that funding. So I just wanted to update you on that. I'm not really clear on what happened with the economic development funding, but I am hoping that somehow either that can still happen, or if there's other, I know the regional grant and aid, I don't think it's happening, but if there's individual directors who are passionate about this project and would like more information or to speak to me, we would be certainly open to gathering money from across the realms, as it were. So I think that's it. If anyone has any questions. Oh, and Al, we're coming to North Cowichan. We're just working with some of your staff. So it's because we wanted to get stuff through for Barrie that we jumped in and did this one first. But we'll definitely come to North Cowichan Council and do the same presentation with hopefully some good news. So any questions?
Yeah, there's well, I have a little bit of a speakers list. If you don't mind, I have Directors Morrison, Marsh, and Salmon. Is there anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't know if anybody else is hearing some background noise. Yeah, I'm hearing quite a bit. Hi, Judy. Great presentation. Thank you, Sandy. It's exciting to see the work that you're doing, and always been a big supporter and love the fact that you're, the different groups that you're working with and the like. So fantastic work. So part of the ask that you're making in regards to funding, we have to make sure that when we expend local taxpayer dollars, that it's for the benefit of local taxpayers. And so for an area like myself or Director Coons, we'd have to make sure that there was some benefit being derived to our community members. So I'm just wondering, given your adaptation to COVID and the fact that you're putting a lot of vegetable product out the door, COVID's going to make it difficult for you to host a larger numbers of people, especially as we get into the second wave of this. Have you given any thought to perhaps going out and supporting people that are a little more housebound out in the other areas that are wanting to maybe garden, but they're out on their own. They don't really have a lot of support and resources, and that there could maybe be some outreach and support given to people that might want to do a little bit on their little plot of land out, away from the major centers. So, if that was something that was being contemplated by your group, I could see justification in providing a grant and aid from the taxpayers of my electoral area. So any thoughts on whether or not that might be a direction you would be going in?
Thank you. So we received some funding from United Way on a different stream to reach the outlying areas, specifically around emergency food. But also we've been thinking, and we are coming out to Lake Cowichan and that area specifically, as well as Chemainus and Malhat. But the idea also has been that you're right, we can deliver food out there, but we could also provide seeds and starts and things out to the outlying area. So that's definitely on our plan. Right now, of course, no one's really planting too much, but that grant does extend into next year. So that is definitely on our radar.
Thank you. Director Marsh and Director Stone, could you turn off your microphone? I'm just hearing, so I'm not sure if it's yours.
Hi, Judy.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't have a microphone here, so I'm using that's
okay.
why it doesn't.
Thank you.
May I carry on, Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Director Marsh.
I'm just blown away by how gorgeous it's looking. And I wondered how the uptake is on the lending library.
We've had quite a bit of business earlier in the spring. Obviously, in the summer, there's not a lot of field turning and things like that. Our main instrument is a mower that is interchanges with plow for tilling fields. So that usually goes out more in the spring, but we'll be seeing a bit of an uptick again. People that use it are really impressed with it, and it's been a great thing. We're trying to think of other things that we can include in the lending library that are useful to the public. So I think it's a great project.
Follow up, Madam Chair. Yeah, so as Judy mentioned, North Cowichan has I don't think it's very much, we charge you to lease the land. We also have, as Judy's aware, because I think that's where the money came from for the lending library from our part, is a 0.5 dedicated tax towards climate change. So there's certain criteria, and I'm sure you're aware of it, Judy, and I'd encourage you to look into to see. I don't think this year's is spoken for. And so if you're looking for, I think it's about $30,000 a year, you may or may not be successful. So I'm telling you that now because I think I'll be at Treaty when you come to North Cowichan. And I'll just be joining the North Cowichan meeting during the business part since I've already seen your presentation. But, you know, I just have to say every year, you just add more and more and more. And welcome to Sandy. Great presentation. You guys have done so much for food, as has Lori's area on her Cheetah Slow movement. And I'm really proud of Cowichan. And you guys have a lot to do with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. If I can just respond to that. I did talk to Sean a while pre-COVID. So I'll connect back with him about that and see where he's at. So thank you for that reminder. Yeah, I think just, you know, we had a 5-year lease with North Cowichan that ended in July. We have a 1-year extension just because we were in the mid of COVID and a bunch of changes. So I really appreciate that 1-year extension, which gave us time to kind of figure out what we're doing. And, you know, I think everyone can agree that the farm was off to a bit of a slow start first few years, and Sandy has just really just brought it home. And I'm really proud of the work that's going on there right now. Thank you for that, Kate.
Thank you. I have one more speaker, I believe, Director Salmon.
Thank you. I actually just taking a sip of coffee, but since I have the floor, thank you. Yes, great presentation and inspiring, very inspiring to see. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Deborah, Director Toporowski, and then Director Smith.
Oh, there we go. I thought I had muted myself and it muted back again. Anyway, thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Judy. It's been really wonderful to see the growth since you put the fence up and what has, you know, been developed on that piece of property in the open space. Great job. And also, I was just wondering, you mentioned school participation, and I was wondering if you made outreach to Chief Seymour, because we do have our own school in Glenora, and maybe their classes might want to join in that. And sometimes we do have some own source revenue that might be able to be, you know, sent your way. So yeah, just a thought. And I think it would be a great opportunity because I think, like you said, during this COVID time, people started thinking about producing their own food. I know my neighbors, you know, next door didn't think that they could grow cauliflower or broccoli. They watched the growth of our broccoli and they just planted cauliflower. The deers got to it the other night because they forgot to put their sprinkler on. But it's produced a really good head of cauliflower, and it's just time and care and just those things to learn along the way. Thank you.
I turn now to Director Smith.
Thank you through the chair to Sandy and Judy. That was an amazing presentation. I've been gardening, or I should say my husband's been a gardener for multiple years. He provides a huge garden, and he does starts and puts them out at the end of the driveway. And the community this year actually was banging on our door constantly in and out of our greenhouse. People are looking for this type of service, and this is amazing, having the seeds, having the starts. Now people are talking about, oh, how did this grow? How did that grow? So COVID, even though it has brought challenges towards you, it also has brought awareness that might not have been there in the past. So I thank you for your service. This is amazing. And I know that the kitchen, we're all going to be coming for a lovely meal at some point. Good luck on the kitchen. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'd like to thank you, Judy and Sandy, for your presentation today, and give you our silent appreciation.
Thanks so much, everyone. It was so nice to see you all.
Take care.
To your meeting. I think we get booted out
Thanks,
now.
everyone.
We don't get to hang around and, listen in on you. Right, thanks again. Bye.
Bye. Now it's we have almost been an hour, and before we go into another application, could we take a 5-minute? I'm just looking at is that okay with everyone? Okay, 5 minutes. Come back. And 10:32.
Buffering. The camera's live.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you've filled up your water and ready to go for the next round. We are now moving to reports. Ms. Legault, R1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. R1 is a report from the Environmental Services Division on the Cowichan Riverbottom Road area flood and erosion hazard mapping. The proposed recommendation is that it be recommended to the board that staff prepare a floodplain management bylaw based on the Cowichan Riverbottom Road area flood and erosion hazard mapping report prepared by Northwest Hydraulics Consultants, dated September 3rd, 2020. And I believe staff have some introductory comments.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Moore. Welcome.
Thank you to the chair and to the committee. So I'll just share my screen here. I've got a few slides for a presentation to introduce this. So are folks seeing the screen there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll move into this. So as the committee is aware, we've been doing a number of updated flood mapping projects around the region recently. Since 2004, these flood mapping updates have been the responsibility of local governments. So any updates or new mapping that's done to the provincial ones has to be done by local government. And we've been pretty fortunate in obtaining some grant funding to update the flood mapping to meet current federal and provincial guidelines. And this includes bringing in climate change into the picture. What we're looking at is flood maps and erosion maps here in the Riverbottom area. So there's several types of flood mapping. There can be coastal flood mapping where we're looking at sea level rise, flooding around the lakes, like the Shawnigan flood mapping that was presented to the committee at the last meeting. And here we've got river flooding where we have both the potential for flooding, the river spilling over its banks, but also the potential erosion and the river shifting its channel, and we get a lot of sediment and debris. So in the Riverbottom Road area, the existing flood mapping that's been there is 1997 mapping from the province, from the Ministry of the Environment. And then there was also a 1989 engineering report that was done. We call it the Hardy BBT report that looked both at flooding and erosion. And essentially what we have in this area is the blue shows the existing floodplain from the Ministry of Environment. And then the yellow and the red is areas that are prone to erosion from this engineering report. And then the yellow is other areas that are outside the designated floodplain, but are still prone to have some flooding. So now this was looking at a 50-year horizon, and we're already about 30 years into that mapping. So all the maps in this area were due for an update to meet the new standards. We've had a report done by Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, and they've provided new flood maps for the area. So this is the upper reach of the river, what the new flood maps are looking like. And you'll see the dark blue area is what we call the floodway. where there shouldn't, we wouldn't want to see development in that area because you get such high water levels and flows that it's dangerous to be there and damaging to property. And then outside that is the flood fringe, the lighter blue areas where there can be development. There could be, at a 200-year flood, there could be some water in those areas, but things that are built to the flood construction level should be able to withstand that. And you'll also see the lines going across the river. Those indicate the flood construction level as you move upstream. So they cross the whole entire floodplain, the floodway and the flood fringe, and define the flood level. So the three things we've got on that map are the floodway. So that's the deep part. It's roughly equivalent to an area that's flooded at a 20-year flood. And that would be the area where we don't want to see development. The flood fringe is adjacent to that. And then, so this flood hazard area or the floodplain, you can see spans the river. And then the flood construction level takes a look at what the water level could be within the floodplain and then adds a freeboard above that. And that accounts for things like log jams or sediment buildup causing the water to build up higher than one would expect. So things that are built to the flood construction level, the habitable portion of the dwelling is above that level. So whether it's raised up by fill, as is shown in this lower picture here, or some other way to keep that up above the flood level. There were, so as I mentioned, there was floodplain mapping in the area from 1997, and they did have flood construction levels. Northwest Hydraulics has done this project to update the flood mapping. So they've brought in the new inputs, 2019 LIDAR. They were also out there after this year's flooding with boats on the river collecting bathymetry. We've also got better hydrometric data, a flood history of the area, and we take into account the climate change projections for the watershed. They've identified new flood construction levels, and these are generally higher than the flood construction levels that were previously in the area, generally in the order of a meter to 2 meters higher. The reasons for these are the ones given there, and also the fact that the 1997 levels were to different standards, and they were based on a daily average reading rather than the peak instantaneous reading, and were also calibrated differently. So for all these factors, we've got higher flood construction levels. The other piece that we're taking a look at here is updating the erosion. So the other maps that go with this report, in addition to the floodplain maps, we have erosion hazard maps. These ones, again, span the same reach of the river, and they show a darker yellow and a lighter yellow. And the darker yellow is the modern valley bottom. So this is based on historic channel migration and looking at where the river's been, and also areas that are likely to be subject to 2 meters of that are within 2 meters of the water level at a 2-meter flood. So these are areas where the river has been in the past, the relatively recent past, and it's likely within the 50-year time frame of this planning report that the river could move within those areas. So erosion hazards have to be considered there. And then the broader zone is the erosion hazard area, where this looks at the superficial geology around the area to look at how much farther it's conceivable that the river could move into new areas where it hasn't been considered in the past. So that's the longer term. So at the moment, there aren't as clear guidelines with this erosion mapping for how to include it into development permits. It's fairly straightforward with the floodplain and flood construction levels. So one of the next steps will be working with community planning on how to address hazards within the erosion hazard area. At the moment, we'd be looking at geotechnical reports to have a site-based look and see what mitigations need to be put in place to deal with any erosion hazards in the area. So that's a quick overview, and if I can stop sharing my screen here, then I can pass it back.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Looking at the committee, good report. So great to see that we're getting more and more of this information and that. And so I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, yes, I am. Okay. Director Nicholson, go ahead, and then Director Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. I am wondering, is there an increased risk to existing people on that flood that are living in that area?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, the risk hasn't changed. Our understanding and awareness of it has changed to some extent. These flood construction levels are generally something that's looked at going forward, that new construction within those areas would have to meet the flood construction level. It's certainly information that's useful to have for existing homeowners. Buildings might or would like to take a look at this and see that perhaps a home that was built to previous levels, given what we now know about river levels and climate change, while it meets the standards, they might want to consider some additional flood-proofing measures if they're well below what the current levels are shown to be.
So it strikes me that we need to have some sort of a communication plan around this to the community, and we need to incorporate it as quickly as possible into our regulations. So what's the process for those two things?
So yeah, through the chair to Director Nicholson, the resolution that we're recommending is to work with the planning department to develop a floodplain mapping bylaw, so that will formally adopt this mapping as the levels that we use to evaluate development and building applications. As far as communications, the report and the new mapping will be available on our website after this meeting, assuming it's adopted going forward. And we'll also be working with GIS to have the data available to the public. We have a workshop scheduled with our planners and building inspectors to make sure that everyone's aware of the new information. So that's coming up next week.
Follow up, Director Nicholson, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up because I am a little bit, I do think this communication issue is really important. This material is very hard to understand what the actual implications are. And so I think we need to develop some more simple explanation for lay people who live in that area.
Okay, moving to I have Director Smith, Sebring, Morrison, and Marsh. Am I missing anyone? And Stone. Go ahead, Director Smith.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to Mr. Moore, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. As we're moving through our HOCP and MOCP, information like this is very important for us to put within our new official community plans that we're working through. The bylaw, will the bylaw then connect into the MOCP through the community planning department, so that we make sure that we're not having a bylaw that's sitting separate away from it? Is this something that needs to be addressed as we move through the MOCP process?
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, through the chair to Director Smith. At the moment, some of the floodplain mapping within the region is already in the OCP through development permits. I believe the intent is to create standalone floodplain mapping bylaws for the different regions. So there was the Shawnigan mapping that was it's not currently part of the OCP. It's being brought forward as a separate bylaw, and I believe the same is planned for Riverbottom. But we're definitely working with community planning that they'll make sure that there is the proper alignment between the OCP processes and the floodplain bylaws. I'm not sure where the most appropriate place for it to sit is.
Follow up, Director Smith. Go ahead.
Yes, my concern is that if we are going through the whole MOCP process and then we have separate bylaws, would it be confusing for people who are working through trying to work through a development permit or working through those areas, because they're going to go to the MOCP document. They're going to go through the development permit areas, and then off to the side that's not even part of that document, we're going to have all these additional bylaws. And I think that we thought that we're through MOCP that we're trying to bring everything together to assist staff and to assist the communities. And it seems like we're creating extra little pods out there that may be confusing.
Mr. Crothers?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Director Smith brings up some good points, and I would just like maybe to have Ms. Carroll speak to that. Jeff has done the technical work on the mapping side, but how it gets integrated into our OCP is really a land use services, and maybe if I can have one of our planning staff address that issue if they're available.
Is there anybody from planning staff that would help us out here? I can't see any on my screen.
And not seeing any, Madam Chair, I think Director Smith's points are well taken, and there definitely has to be alignment with those, and certainly the benefits of having it all in one place, so that those things aren't overlooked. And I can give assurance to the committee that that will be addressed.
Okay. Thank you so much. Moving on now to Director Sebring.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director Smith raised some of the same concerns that I have. Is there, I mean, I understand that, you know, there are concerns with respect to these floodplains, but it seems we instantly default to a regulatory model of bylaws when in fact these could be addressed through development permit areas or other ways. I'm just wondering whether this is the only option that is before us. I mean, you know, I read the lengthy report from the consultant, and I didn't see a recommendation in there for the creation of a bylaw. I'm not opposed to the staff recommendation that's before us. I just want us all to think this through a minute and say, is this what we want to do? And are we going to have these patchworks of bylaws in different electoral areas for different floodplains, or do we take a more holistic approach in the harmonized OCP and through DPAs and different things like that? I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll come back to you, Director Nicholson. I'm moving to Director Morrison, Marsh, and then back to Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just first a point on the package that we were all given. I want to thank Jeff and the staff there for putting together the PowerPoint. I'm a map guy, and I had a great deal of difficulty sort of reading all of that information that was condensed down into our little surface screen. It's really hard to read the legend and to apply it to the map. So thank you for the graphics that you used in your presentation. It helped to clear things up a fair bit. So just in regards to some of the discussion that's going on, you know, I already know that this is working today, even before this new information has been brought to bear, because there have been applications in that area where people that are going to build homes have bumped up against what was the old data and had to make accommodations for the information that was in place with the old reports, and staff made sure that people were building above the potential flood areas and doing the things that they had to do to keep new construction, you know, out of danger. So I know that even what we had in place before this was informing the decisions and the permits that were being issued by staff. So I'm fairly confident in staff being able to transition this new information into a process where our building inspection people and our land development people know what the rules are. The question that I would ask is, Mr. Moore made reference to there being a meeting with the development and building community, and I think it would be really helpful if, as directors, that we could perhaps have the ability to sit in on that presentation to our development community. because we're often out in the community on the front lines and people will ask us about this. And yes, it could be dangerous arming us with that information, but at least we know that if it's in that area of concern, that we can direct people to come into the office and talk to the right staff to ensure that they're doing the right groundwork from the get-go, as opposed to finding out about it later that they have to meet a DPA or a bylaw requirement. So is it possible for us to be invited to sit in on something like that?
I do have Ms. Breen on. Is this a question, would it be for her, or you'd like it for Mr. Moore?
Well, it's really just a question through you, Madam Chair, when this is arranged, and it doesn't matter which department's arranging it, that the ability for directors to sit in on it happen. I don't know who's going to be ultimately arranging this this meeting to happen.
Okay, I wouldn't, Mr. Crothers, we could accommodate that.
Chair, we'll definitely take that. Whether we do a combined meeting with the directors or maybe even a standalone with the directors, we'll have to see how those arrangements are made. And I'm not sure how many people we're talking about in the venue, but yeah, we'll definitely take those comments under advisement.
Thank you. I turn now to Director Marsh.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Moore. Great presentation. I'm not a map person, so it was a bit confusing, but I'm looking at a report on page 2 where it's a little past halfway down, where you're talking about the comparison of the updated floodplain now to 1997 and the increases between 0 and 2 meters. Correct? I have that right? From previous levels. I can't hear you, Mr. Moore, if your mic's on.
Yeah, that's right. That's the range.
Okay, so I'm wondering, since all over the world we're seeing that projected increases in precipitation and all kinds of other things are coming way sooner, have you taken that into consideration? That, you know, or did you do this as you've done it always, or are you thinking ahead to, well, this is what normally we would expect within this period of time? Because I'll tell you, I'm just thinking of if people are going to build something and in 5 years the water's at their front door, then maybe we need to look at it through a different lens. But is that what you did? You looked at, you know, sort of potential worst case scenario?
Mr. Moore, I think we had.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great to know. Good work.
Thank you. We did look at, it's based on the climate projections that we had done in 2017. And there's a bunch of different indicators in there that are all suggesting that the flows are going to be higher. So the amount of rain that falls in intense storms is supposed to increase the overall amount of precipitation. If you look at it over a 5-day period or a 24-hour period. So based on all those different metrics, NHC recommended using a 20% increase to the flows to represent the effects of climate change going forward, and that's roughly in line with what the indicators are showing that we'd see by the 2050s.
And Mr. Hatami would like to chime in here. Mr. Hatami.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add something to that. With the new approach and the modeling that we did, we considered the impact of climate change, including the localized storm. That in the previous studies was not part of it, and as Jeff mentioned, that was an average kind of precipitation. But for the localized storm, we look at the peak, value of that. And again, it translated to 20%, 15% increase in the kind of rainfall, and rainfall translates actually into the flow. We consider that. The other thing that I wanted to make a comment, from time to time, the regulations change and new act comes into place. So we have to go and revise and amend our bylaws and the processes that we do things. Here, is basically the new data based on the new kind of parameters. And we see some differences between what was done in 1997, 1998, and versus what we are dealing with that. okay, yes, ideally, if we could actually add or include that immediately into the harmonized or modernized OCP, that's the perfect place to do that. But the question for us is, how long would it take? We finish that modernized OCP. And meanwhile, it's up to you if you want us to delay that, not to do it and wait for the OCP to get amended, that's fine. But again, meanwhile, we have to use, the old data, which is not accurate. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Hatami. You have a follow-up, Director Marsh. Who is it addressed to?
I do, through you to Mr. Hatami. So if I understood you correctly, you were still using the methods that we've been using all along to make this prediction?
The method has been actually modified and changed, and the province wanted us to include, the impacts of climate change. And
right.
Again,
but I guess what I'm trying to say, and not very well, I apologize. The impacts of what we think today climate change will be, or the worst case scenario in impacts for climate change in terms of flooding, or
that's
somewhere in between.
That would be the impacts and the increase in the flow. And then, we realized that, the waterway do not have the capacity and they're going to spill over, the adjacent lands. How far does it go? It's actually a function of, the topography and then the development, the land development in the adjacent area. The other thing is, in the last 30 years, lots of things have changed to the watershed. And new development, roads, and whatever you may call it, it has an impact on the flow in our waterways.
Right.
So maybe we covered, yeah.
Yeah, that's my point. Did you take that into consideration in a new way or a larger way now, because we know that predictions made in the past for instance, what's going to happen by 2030 in many places has already happened?
Yes, we did. That was part of the thing, and basically following the provincial guideline, we had to. Yeah, it was included in our modeling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn to, thank you, Mr. Hatami, and I'd like to turn to Ms. Breen if she would like to comment on the HOCP.
Good morning, everyone, and through the chair. Right now, because the HOCP has not been adopted, we can integrate these new maps into the HOCP, and the process for doing so will be through a bylaw adoption. Shawnigan right now has been drafted as bylaw 4348. We have an explanatory pamphlet to assist the public and the building inspectors. It would be adopted by bylaw, and then the maps would be integrated into the OCP. Because of this section of the Act, it's adopted through a separate bylaw. That would be the same process for Riverbottom.
Thank you so much. And I turn now to our final speaker, Director Nicholson, and then we'll look at back to the resolution. Director Nicholson, please.
I'm okay, and I'm prepared to move the resolution if that's helpful.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And Director Stone, did you want to speak, or you're just seconding? Your slow motion on your, okay, great. Sign language, good, good, good. So I'm going to call the question on the resolution. Does anybody need it reread? Seeing none, okay, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion, opposed, Director Sebring. Okay, thank you. Motion has carried. Moving on now to R2, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R2 is the report from the Environmental Services Division regarding Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program Partnership Policy, and the proposed resolution is that it be recommended to the Board that the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program Partnership Policy is attached to the October 28th, 2020 Environmental Services Staff Report be approved.
Great, and who will be taking this? Ms. Miller? Anybody on staff want to present this at all?
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I will wait for questions rather than taking your time.
Thank you.
We've discussed this in the past, so I think it's fairly straightforward.
Yes. Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Miller while we have her on? Director Wilson, then Director Kuhn. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I can see the point of this coming forward, but I obviously have some concerns about cost here, because we see in the report that it says under financial considerations, excuse me, it says no direct physical considerations are expected here, and I'm concerned with the word direct. This is a very broad statement and is something that needs much more explanation, given that we're giving $750,000 a year in already in play. Are there extra funds involved here? Because there's another statement which says by providing fiscal support where needed. So there's a bit of contradiction here where it says in one case there are no direct financial considerations, and then it says by providing fiscal support. I'm not in favor of providing any more funds than those which are already being provided here. So a little bit of explanation on those two, please.
Madam Chair, if I can take that and Ms. Miller can chime in. I believe the reason that no direct financial considerations were in the report is that this is a policy. This is simply a policy document. The decisions around any funding that's granted to any of our partners under this agreement would be budget decisions that would be made through a formal report to the board. The board would be making those decisions with respect to allocating those funds out of the drinking water and watershed protection function. So the purpose of this is just to establish the policy, and I think Ms. Miller was correct in that there's no direct cost associated with this policy, but you will be making subsequent decisions on a case-by-case basis moving forward.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Crothers. I turn now to Director Stone.
Maybe I can actually answer Director Wilson's question.
Yeah, I'd like a follow-up if present, please.
So if I can just speak to your question, though, Director Wilson, was it that you were wondering if there was any additional funds outside of the DWWP? My understanding, and staff should clarify this, any funds in these partnership agreements would come from the existing funding envelope established in the drinking water and watershed protection function. So it'd be no extra cost.
Sorry, Director Wilson.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yes, follow up.
Yeah, that's the assurance I was seeking, because I as I've said there, I'm not a great believer in some of the, sort of indirect and direct. It doesn't really explain anything. What I was seeking here was the assurance that the funds we have allocated already are the funds that will be used, and that there will be no extra costs or budgetary stuff coming forward. That's all I was seeking.
Yeah, and that was clarified. Thank you. I turn to Director Morrison, then Director Sebring, and do I have anyone else? And back to Director Stone and Director Smith. Go ahead, Director Stone.
Okay, are you coming back to me? Okay. So
yes, no, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, it's actually worse in here with this chunky video, but
and you're really in slow-mo too.
Yeah,
from our end.
I think
okay.
You can hear me though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So my question through to staff was thinking of this in light of the Cowichan Watershed Board. Is there within this policy, is there a way to establish a more consistent agreement with the Cowichan Watershed Board, so it's not an annual an annual discussion, like establish a terms of reference and solidify the relationship with the Cowichan Watershed Board? Or is it meant to be a one-off every year or based on certain functions?
If I may,
go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to the director. The policy establishes a process and a procedure, and so the Cowichan Watershed Board would be one of the entities affected by this policy. And the idea is that we are establishing a contract for services. That contract can be an annual contract or it could be a multi-year contract, but it's clearly established what the outputs of that contract are, what the expectations are, as well as the financial considerations that would be attached to it. So the value of the contract and the deliverables under the contract. And so there is an opportunity, should the board so wish, to have a multi-year contract with the Cowichan Watershed Board. So it's not fixed by this policy that it can only be over a certain period of time. It's the board's decision with regards to fiscal considerations.
Follow up, Director Stone.
Thank you. I just wanted that clarity that it's a board decision and that the staff could work based on that expression of interest. A group like CWB would make their expression of interest known, and then that would come to the board for a decision. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. If I may make a slight clarification, there are two types of contracts addressed under this particular policy. One is for a contract for direct services in line with the drinking water and watershed protection work plan and budget. So for example, a contract with a local stewardship group to do water quality is clearly within the drinking water and watershed programs budget function, and that would be an operational contract. We wouldn't bring that to the board for approval of a contract for direct services. A contract for services such as the Cowichan Watershed Board's service are really different than a direct contract, like, you know, collect 5 water samples over X number of days in these particular locations. So those are the ones that would be coming via a staff report to the board as part of the annual financial process. So for example, we anticipate bringing one forward next month for the Cowichan Watershed Board with a detailed assessment of what their work plan is for the next year.
Director Stone, do you have a follow-up? No. Okay, I'm moving on now to Director Morrison, then Sebring, then Smith, then Kuhn, and Wilson. Director Morrison, go ahead, please.
I'll pass for now, Madam Chair.
I go to Director Sebring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm reading the staff report and the analysis at the bottom of page 1 of that report, and it says the DWWP program is not a granting program. And yet, the ultimate effect of this resolution that's before us and the development of this policy is that it will become a granting program of some sort. That's the way I read it. We will be designating money to community groups to partner with us in administering the program. How is that not a grant? And I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but I'm getting conflicting signals here. I understand there's a case to be made for community partnerships, but then let's not come out and say this is not a granting program, because there are community organizations that are going to come to us for grants to help us do this work.
It's a policy to direct.
I'm struggling a little bit with that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Crothers may be able to clarify for you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand Director Sebring's question. These are structured, in the true sense of the word, they would be a grant, but they're structured as fee-for-service agreements as opposed to a grant the board might give to a group to undertake a project. When we had regional grants and aid, you had many applications from proponents wanting to undertake a specific project, and you provided them with a grant. This is more of a fee-for-service where they will be conducting work on behalf of the regional district or behalf of a partnership with the regional district to achieve objectives of the drinking water and watershed protection program. So that's the difference between kind of a grant and what we would call in this case more of a fee-for-service. That's why we're structuring the requirement to have deliverables and a work plan and those kinds of things, so that there's accountability for those funds that are issued.
Appreciate the clarification. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're moving on now to Director Smith. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I'm finding that constantly the Cowichan watershed is part of the discussion when it comes to funding. the presentation that was done by the Cowichan Watershed Society indicated that the funds that they receive through this function are their core funding. When we start to reach a core funding situation, that becomes something where you start doing an established service bylaw. In the past 10 years, the Society has received $500,000 of CVRD taxpayers, all taxpayers from the north all the way to the south, to fund the work that they have done. Their work is amazing. I wish that we had that in our area in the north. We just don't have that ability. With the Cowichan Watershed Board being supported and started, I believe, through this board, it has reached a potential of going beyond what is the normal small group out there doing water testing. And somehow they need to have their own function for that type of funding, so that we can also have other areas growing and becoming as powerful and as knowledgeable as that group. We have people that are sitting on this board, at this board table, or at this table, at the board table, that actually sit on the Cowichan Watershed Board and are making decisions there that pass on to the society that then receives funding. I am not supportive of this partnership policy unless we look at reviewing it within a year to see if we're moving in a good direction or whether it's satisfying the NGOs that are actually out there. I'm not too sure how many can actually do all the qualifications criteria that are being required of them in this policy. They're small. They don't have the volunteers in place to actually put all of this together. This policy is almost written for one group and one group only, and I definitely have concerns about that. And one of the things that it says here is that the program meets the needs of the larger community. I'd like to see that be part of it. So as I've said, I'm not necessarily in support of this policy at this time. I have too many questions involving it. Thank you.
Turn to Director Stone. Did you have to go ahead?
Oh, I didn't realize I was next up in the speakers list. You know, I see it quite differently. When this policy was developed, and Ms. Miller could correct me if I'm wrong, I understood that there was some engagement with the other local stewardships groups. There's been conversations, whether it's, you know, Shawnigan Basin or Cowichan Valley North groups, about what kind of fees for service arrangements could be arranged, and this is the policy that would enable those types of agreements to go forward, and I would move the recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to still have my speakers list. I have Directors Wilson, Kuhn, and Marsh. So Director Wilson, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Director Sebring has used a statement of conflicting statements. Yes, there are. There's a lot of conflicting statements in here. One of the things is that the budget decisions will be made by the board, allocating from funds in their water quality contract. That was mentioned as well, which is allowed. So does this mean that I will not have to fight for 2 years to get my water quality testing done here in the Fisher Road area, as I did before by going to ministries and all the rest of it? I was told before that this particular function was not meant for that. Now I'm hearing that, hang on, yes it is, we can allow this kind of thing because of a water quality contract, which is allowed. So when my 2-year funding ends, can I then come forward to apply for funding from this to continue the water testing and quality in my area? There's conflicting statements here.
Mr. Hatami, I see that you've come on. Did you want to respond to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I wanted to bring everybody's attention to is, as part of this drinking water and watershed protection function, we developed actually a sort of a strategy. And all of the above mentioned groups, like Shawnigan Basin Society, the Cowichan Watershed Board, and communities from north, south, east, and west, they participated in that. And we were actually in the process of finalizing, having more detailed work plan for 10 years. So whatever we put there as part of the goals and objectives is not up to those societies and groups to come forward and say, I want to actually do a study on, I don't know, some amphibians. But whatever they want to do and is not in line with the goals and objectives that we want to actually develop and deliver, so it's not there. So this policy should read with that strategy and the goals and objectives of that function. So, I mean, yes, we want to do testing on something, but has nothing to do with this function. That's one comment, and I want everybody to be clear on that. Thank you.
Follow up, please, Madam Chair.
Just a second, Director Wilson. I have Mr. Cruthers that would like to chime in here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think maybe I'll try and clarify Director Wilson's question. When we're talking water quality under the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection, I believe we're talking about a broader water quality assessment, meeting water quality objectives for a watershed or for a portion of a watershed. I believe what Director Wilson is speaking to is a very specific source point contamination issue that we were monitoring, and so those are two different objectives under the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection. So I just wanted to clarify that there's broader water quality objectives for a watershed, and then there's also specific issues, point source contamination issues on a case-by-case basis.
Follow up, please.
Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, I'm still confused here. We see it here, water quality contracts, fee for service, this, that, and the other. Water is water. It doesn't matter whether it's specific or not. There's too much in this report which have conflict in there. And I, for one, will not be supporting this until I get complete clarification on this. It's just there's too many questions still to ask here.
Director Kuhn.
I am not in favor of this policy. I find policies quite often kind of string up the board. Now we have a policy, well, but you decided to have that policy. I want to have choices individually, and if other organizations come in and want to do work for us, they should apply, and we should on an individual basis decide if we want to do that or if we don't. The moment we have a policy, I know I've seen it in the past, we get confronted by management if we even waver on the policy. Well, but you decided to do that, and I will not be boxed in. I just don't like that idea. Thank you.
Director Marsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I recall a presentation by Ms. Miller, and Ms. Miller, I really appreciate this presentation, by the way. I really like that the preliminary evaluation criteria, and that you've included it for us. But I recall that this was part of the drinking watershed function planning that we've been doing. And this is just one more thing, one of the things that you are going to be bringing forward. Am I right?
Ms. Miller?
If I may, thank you. Yes, it is one of the major components, and as Mr. Carruthers alluded to, in the development of the drinking water plan and the 10-year plan and the consultation with the stewardship groups and the larger community, we recognize that we will need to work with the community in order to actually meet the objectives within the strategy. We can't do it on our own. The challenge then becomes how best to do it. How do we organize so that it is structured, it's transparent to the public, so that we're not just seen as handing money from the program for works within the region. So it does allow two mechanisms. One, which is basically an administrative and a staff decision making about how best to utilize the existing budget to meet specific objectives, and that might be the surface water quality data collection. But it also allows, through the policy is laid out, proposals or requests from the community to come forward in a very structured way, so that we are not, kind of moving around dynamically over the course of the year, but it's part of the budget process. It allows us to actually implement the strategy and communicate the strategy's effectiveness over time. And so, yes, there is an opportunity for the public to come forward and say, I've got a great idea, but that's part of the budget process. So those reports would come forward at a certain period of time to the board for things that are outside of the already approved program. So to the issue of, say, for example, water quality, we have a board-approved surface water quality strategy at this point that was taken forward to the board earlier this year. One of the major work plans in the drinking water and watershed protection strategy is also the development of a groundwater protection and groundwater protection strategy in terms of how and what and where we monitor. That has not yet been developed, but it would be taken to the board when it is concluded for the board's ratification, so that we're not reacting constantly to dynamic issues. We're looking at it in a very structured way. The last thing with this particular strategy, if I may, is it allows us to move beyond saying we are funding core activities or core costs of a community group. We're really looking at what is it that the community group is providing and is aligned with the CVRD board's objectives. And so what are the outcomes? Is that lobbying federal and provincial government? Is it providing regular updates and learning exercises or opportunities for collaboration between the board and other entities? So structuring it around deliverables allows them to give us a cost for those deliverables, which would then presumably cover their operation costs themselves. So we're putting it to more of a business perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Marsh. I have Directors Morrison, Toporowski, and back to Wilson to close. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in regards to this process, and this is what I believe this board asked staff to deliver. With the Drinking Water Watershed Protection Service was approved and created and taxed for, and there has been a lot of attention drawn to this service. Now, that portion of the budget that will be used for these specific fee-for-service arrangements, it was a desire of this group, of this board, to ensure that it wasn't a one-off, squeaky wheel gets the money, and that there was good policy and rationale for granting dollars for fee-for-service. So the technical advisory group was formed, which is a form of a first filter to make sure that there's merit in the work that's being done. And we told staff to engage those potential groups that might be those fee-for-service providers, and what would be the qualifications and the policies that made sense for this program to be carried out. So we've been paying a great deal of attention to this. We've given staff marching orders to go and fulfill the goals and objectives of this program, and they're bringing this back to us saying, this is the work product that that's come from all of this work. So this is exactly what I believe we have directed staff to go out and do. Develop a policy so that when we have service providers come to us within the confines of the grant or the fee-for-service dollars, grant dollars that are in the budget, we make the decisions and the awards are given based on good, solid foundational policies. So this seems to me exactly what we've directed staff to do. There's been a lot of attention paid to it, and I think that if we want this program to move forward, we have to put the policy in place so that we can begin the work of engaging with the community to get these sorts of projects underway. That's it. Thank you. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Director Morrison. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if this is the same kind of plan that the Regional District of Nanaimo is working towards. I believe that they had a plan, a 10-year plan, as well as you mentioned in your report. And if so, there are some really good moves forward on this report if it follows that same kind of plan. Like for instance, there could be rebates for water well testing, and then watershed stressors or another thing. Yeah, so I know this board decides in the end when people come to us, each individual thing that comes towards us, you know, or when another group comes and asks us for support for their watershed or things that we need to look at. I think it's still probably going to be the same, but this will give us a guide to how to get to there at the end. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on now to final speaker is Director Wilson. Can't see you on my screen now. You keep moving around. There we go. Director Wilson, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've always thought of myself as being a fairly logical person, and I am. That's been my whole life. And to be quite honest, I am still totally confused by the language which has been thrown around here. It's not direct, it's not logical, and it's woolly, to say the least. And I've heard the words groundwater. If I have to come back in a year's time and say, what are we going to do about the groundwater protection of 17,000 people down here in the south? And I'm told this fund does not cover this, even though it seems to cover this, I'm not going to be a very happy person. I can't support this in its present form. It needs much more structure and it needs much more clarity.
Okay, that is our final speaker, and seeing no other hands up, I believe it was moved and seconded. It's been a while now. It was moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? I have Director Wilson, Haim, and Director Smith, and Director Sebring. Motion is carried. Kuhn, put your hand up or opposed, against. Sorry, I'll just read it out. Director Smith, Sebring, Haim, and Kuhn. The motion is carried. Moving on now to any unfinished business.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is none.
And we don't believe we have any closed. And then question period, and there's no new business. Question period is, do we have any questions?
I'm just checking.
Director Smith has a question. Director Smith?
No, I didn't have a question. What I had was I'd like to make a recommendation that the policy is reviewed within a year.
You're making a motion for the last
Yes.
policy that the last presentation that we just made, that it be, is there a seconder for that? It's been seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion on that? Director Marsh.
Just through you to Mr. Carruthers or any of his staff who would have the answer. I'm absolutely certain there is a review process and timeline for this. Am I right?
Mr. Carruthers, is there a review and timeline? No, there is
not necessarily, Madam Chair. I mean, this policy's been established. If the board, as it often does, chooses to review something after a period of time when they're implementing a new policy, that's completely appropriate.
Okay, it's moved and seconded that we review this policy in a year. Seeing no other hands up, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. Now we move on to Ms. Legault again. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no submissions for question period.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to adjournment. A motion to adjourn. So moved and second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Seeing none. Thank you very much, and see you in an hour or so.